Hello and welcome to another day of English 2. I'm your online facilitator, Miss Bear. As a reminder, we are in a CommonLit unit and I'm calling it our personal narrative unit because midway through this unit, we're going to be writing a personal narrative. But as a whole, it is Unit 1 of CommonLit, and it is coming of age. And so our essential question for this unit is, what experiences lead us from childhood into adulthood? And so at the midpoint of this unit, we're going to be writing a personal narrative. In this personal narrative, you are going to be describing an experience that has been part of your transition out of childhood. And when deciding on that moment, you want to consider a loss that you experienced, a realization or difficult truth that you learned, a new responsibility that you had to take on, and or a risk that you decided to take. And so we just finished a text yesterday about a risk that Jerry took when he was going through a tunnel. The text was called Through the Tunnel. Today, you're going to be exploring a little bit more into that text, and you're going to be learning how to provide context when you introduce a quote so that your evidence is clear. So you're going to need a couple of things on your desk today, and so you should have a copy of Through the Tunnel, the text that you just finished reading. It should be annotated to the hilt. It should have lots of writing all over it in the margins and all through the text. Also, your teacher should give you, or your teacher in your classroom should give you another handout, and these are all available on CommonLit's website under free resources for this unit. This one is Introducing Evidence with Text. Today, you're going to take some notes on this handout, and there are some things that you're going to be doing by yourself with that handout. But you're going to need both your text Through the Tunnel as well as the handout Introducing Evidence with Context. So let's see what we're going to be doing. So part 1 on your worksheet is, what is context and why does it matter? So you're going to write an essay today, a short one, maybe just a paragraph, a good paragraph, but in your opinion, how does Jerry change as a result of his experience in the tunnel? So we're going to be looking at a response from Student 1 and Student 2. Student 1 says, in paragraph 34, the narrator explains, he was trembling with horror at that long, long tunnel under the rock, under the sea. That's not too terribly bad, but let's look at how Student 2 answered that question. When Jerry decides to swim through the tunnel, the author builds suspense by describing Jerry. He was trembling with the horror at that long, long tunnel under the rock, under the sea. Do you hear the difference? Both students used the same piece of evidence, but Student 2 got a little context before they introduced that quote. It's important to put that context in there, especially when you are answering one of these prompts for your state test that's going to be coming up, right? And so you want to be thinking about all of these different things and ways that you can describe the character and look at how that character has made changes and how the plot has changed that character. Because a person doesn't just change without something happening, a reason for that. That is the context that you're giving. So Student 2 gave the context of how Jerry changed and the experience as a result of his experiences. So the next part is part 2, and it's taking a deeper analysis with this text. So let's look at that. You're going to take notes here. Make sure you're writing these in your packet. So when providing text for a quote, you need to be clear in who is speaking, thinking, or writing at this moment in the text. Several times the narrator goes back and forth in Through the Tunnel between it being Jerry or his mother. So think about that when you're writing and giving that context. Sometimes we have to add additional context if it makes your it's clearer, such as when it is happening, what is happening at that moment, or where it is taking place. I see a who, when, what, where. I've heard those questions before, and I know you have too. You can also explain the quotation's relevance to your argument. This can be thought of as putting part of your explanation before the quotation. If an author uses a specific literary technique, you might also include this in the context. We'll talk about those literary techniques, or you can ask your teacher about them, but we're going to explore those a little bit more further into another unit. But for now, those literary techniques you've been introduced to all throughout your educational journey, through elementary and through middle school. If you don't remember what those literary techniques are, ask the teacher that's in her classroom, or hey, use your phone to pull it up and say, what are literary techniques? You can find that information really easily and to remind you of what those were when you get ready to write. So these are the notes that you should be writing on your handout. So then let's look at we're still looking at part 2. So read the sample sentence from part 1. When Jerry decides to swim through the tunnel, the author builds suspense by describing Jerry. He was trembling with horror at that long, long tunnel under the rock, under the sea. What types of context did the writer provide in this example? You need to answer that question. Go back to this screen and say, is it when? Is it what? Is it where? Is it who? Does it provide all of that information? So, what types of context? Go ahead and put your answer there. Good. Now, what is the purpose of including the phrase, the author builds suspense by describing Jerry in the context? So I want you to write your answer to that question in that box on your worksheet. Good. Now we're going to go on to section 3 or part 3, which is practice adding context. So here is the context. Here is the quote, and here is your prompt. Provide context for the quotation below that comes from paragraph 41 of Through the Tunnel. Reread that paragraph before adding your context. So, reread that context and that quote. Now, how would you write a sentence that incorporates that context while introducing that quote? Provide that in the blank on your worksheet for part 3. Good. We're going to move on to part 4, and this is independent practice. You are answering the short response prompt for Through the Tunnel. You'll only have about 15 minutes to answer that question. The question is, in your opinion, how does Jerry change as a result of his experience in the tunnel? I don't want you to rewrite what student A or student B said. Don't use that same evidence. I want you to use new evidence. Find another piece of evidence. Remember all of these signposts that you have where you've annotated that text, and you can see Jerry progresses in change. What are those changes? What are those experiences that propel his growth? So I want you to write that in a paragraph in part 4 of your independent practice. So you do have another section called Part 5, Checking Your Work. So I want you to go back through the paragraph that you wrote, and I want you to go to page 4 that says Check Your Work, and I want you to go back and I want you to do highlight, underline, whatever it is that you need to do here, and I want you to hold on to this packet, because when we get ready to write our personal narrative, when we get ready to write our argument at the end of this unit, you're going to need these notes. The notes that you've gotten before and some of the other daily lessons, you should be keeping up with those so that they will help you in writing this essay that's coming up, whether it's the personal narrative or the argument at the end of this unit. So that is it for today. Tomorrow is your vocabulary test. Your teacher may give you some additional time in class to work on this paragraph. They may ask for a little bit more, so just be aware that this lesson may be another day for you. That's up to your teacher in your classroom. We're going to have a vocabulary test today. Don't forget to study. Until next time, happy reading.